In this episode, what I want to cover are the common objections that we face, whether it's in the very beginning of our initial sales conversation or at the very end after you pitch the product. And that objection is, I want to think about it, or I want to talk to my wife about it. Now, in order to help you move past that objection, we have to first understand when that objection commonly happens. And what I mean by that is sometimes that'll happen at the very beginning, right? You'll do your opening pitch and then they'll say, oh, you know what, I need to think about it first, or oh, you know what, I'm not in the market right now, or I need to talk to my wife first. She's the one that makes these decisions. How do you get past that versus going through the entire sales conversation and then having that objection come or that comment come after you've done your presentation, after you've done your pitch? And so there are two different ways to answer that objection. First is that if it happens in the very beginning, you're going to want to go to SalesRemastered.com, where you'll be able to download my sales script. And the sales script is designed to help overcome any objection that you come across at the very beginning of your sales conversation. It's designed in a way to help you take control of the conversation so you can quickly assess the situation and ask the right questions that are going to extract the emotional tie that your prospect has to your service or your product. So it's some pretty powerful stuff. Now, again, you can see the link right below this video, and it'll actually take you directly to that script. Now, commonly though, that objection actually happens a little bit towards the end. After you do your sales pitch, after you do your presentation, and then you go in for the close, however you ask for the sale. Now you'll get an objection of, oh, I'm gonna go and think about it, or I'll pray about it, or I need to talk to my spouse about it a little bit more. How do you get past that? Well, how to get past that is actually reverse engineer. So if you understand that objection happens towards the end, you have to go back and reverse engineer your steps and your process of even getting up to that state. And so a technique that I use is that I write down and I jot down when in my sales sequence or sales prospecting, because it should be broken down in phases. You should have somewhat like a gates of the sale, right? So you go through this gate, and then you go through that gate, and then you go through this gate. I refer to it as more or less like a sales funnel. So in order to continue going down through the different filters where it bottlenecks and out comes a prospect that qualifies for your product, you have to go through a series of steps. And so whatever your process is, your sales conversation could be a minute long, or it could be like mine, it could be about 45 to an hour long on the phone. And so with your process, how you're able to tie it in is find out when in the sequence that objection happens and make note, because it is actually because of us as to why those objections happen. Now, if you think about it, the common objection of I want to think about it more could be happening because we're giving far too much information for the prospect to digest. Keep in mind that you understand your daily lingo, not your prospect. And so when we use fancy words or we forget to dummy it down for the average consumer to understand, then it forces them to want to think about it. It's human nature to fear what you don't understand. So if we're giving nothing but content that a prospect does not understand, they're naturally going to fear it. They may not tell you, but what they will say is, I need to think about it some more. Is because we just overloaded them with some information. And so the best technique at times is really just to leave out the history and create more mystery, right? And so every time you move to a next step, like let's say you go in for the close, you have to leave some sort of suspense at the very end, meaning that, okay, you have an option to say, okay, great, you're qualified, let's go ahead and move forward. Or you could say, all right, great, before I qualify you, I'm gonna need some items first, and then I can confirm that there's a bridge for you to cross. See, it's two different things, two different statements, but nonetheless the result is the same, and it's to go for the sale and just to get kind of like a give take situation. If you're a salesman and you're giving the prospect too much information, like I give without taking, right? Meaning that you're taking information in consideration, you're taking documents in to review their ability to proceed and move forward, then it's just a give. And then ultimately at some point the prospect's just simply not going to need you anymore. Now, same thing with the objection of I want to talk to my spouse. If you reverse engineer it and you understand that, number one, your product or service is the type of decision that must, or more than likely, is made with both parties or any party within the household. It could be like a car, or it could be a house or a mortgage. And oftentimes those are things that people don't impulse buy. They don't say, okay, great, let's do this. Now, some do, and those are great, but most of the time they're actually, oh, I need to think about it and I need to compare it to others. And so my way of getting around that objection is I pay close attention from the very beginning of that conversation all the way through the end, up until the pitch. And what I mean by paying attention is I'm either, if the person was in front of me, I'd look at their wedding ring. I'd make comments like, well, what do you think your wife or what do you think your husband would think about this? Kind of fishing out to see if there is a spouse in case there is no wedding ring. And kind of throw it out there and see if they'll say, oh, there's no other person, it's actually up to me. Perfect. So this is going to be very easy because I can answer your questions. Does that make sense? So you can reword it however you like and fit it wherever you like, but you have to find out if there's other parties involved, because most of the time you're not speaking with the decision maker. In my case, I deal with financial services, so it's a way for me to find out if I'm speaking to the decision maker is I'll ask certain questions that have to do with finances. And in households, husbands and wives, usually it's only one party that handles the finances. With my services that I sell, it's important for me to understand who the decision maker is. And typically the decision maker for my product and my service is the one that handles the finances. And so I'll ask certain questions like, if I looked at your credit report, how much debt would I see? And usually the one that handles the finances are the only ones that can answer that question. Another question is, let's just say that person gives you an estimate. Let's say $4,000 to $6,000. Well, if they don't know the exact figure, they're probably not the person who handles the finances. So then maybe I'll ask another question. I'll say, okay, great. With that $4,000 to $6,000 in credit card debt, what are the monthly payments you sent last month? And so that will say, oh, you know what? My wife handles that. Or, oh, I think we sent $800. When they say, I think we sent, it means they're not the one who handles the finances. So now I understand that I need that spouse or that other party to be present at my sales pitch or my sales presentation. And it's important to understand that person that you're talking to, even though they're not the decision maker, they are the gatekeeper. So it's important that you still take in consideration what their goals are, because the decision maker is the one who sicked that gatekeeper out to filter you, and they're interviewing you. And so when you go through a conversation with them and you're asking them certain questions, pay attention to their concerns, write it down, because it is the spouse or the decision maker that told that gatekeeper on what to look out for. And so when you make note of that and then you invite the decision maker to the sales presentation, like, hey, what time's your wife or what time's your husband going to be home this evening, so that I can confirm some of the information I just went through today before I actually release an estimate or before I release the solution. You have to make it appear that both have to be available. And I'll usually use the reason as, I have to make sure that I'm confirming these numbers are correct before I can even release a solution, or before I can send you my proposal, or before I can send you my estimate. I have to make sure these numbers are correct, otherwise it's going to be inaccurate information you're looking for. And so I'll say things like that to do my very best to make sure that that decision maker is present. Without that person being present, I'm going to have a harder time in converting that sale, because I'm simply leaving it up to someone, the gatekeeper, to reiterate everything that I went over. And I promise you, they're not going to reiterate everything you go over. They're going to mess it up, or they're going to summarize it to a degree where the decision maker is going to be like, hey babe, did you talk to that guy? Yeah, I talked to that guy. He said he's going to save us like $100 or something like that, but he has fees. And that's it. That's it. So the last hour and 2 hours that you spent finessing that lead without taking the time to at least invite that decision maker to that call, you're ultimately, you're giving yourself a disadvantage of not making that sale. And so the next time you do a sale, or the next time you go into a sales conversation, consider the tips that you learned here, and I think you'll find a better way of converting your sales, as well as a more time-efficient process of not having to go back and forth. The last thing you want to do is pitch the gatekeeper and then have to pitch the spouse. So I hope this message helps. If you like the content, please like, subscribe, and share with your sales community. Under the video, under the info, you're going to see other links of where I'm located on social media. So I hope to see you there. Thanks for your time.